Hey everybody, it's Tony Cottaspati from GreatVocalMajority.com YouTube channel, website, and podcast. And today I want to talk about voter ID laws, and specifically in Texas. Now, there is so much fear-mongering on every issue these days. Voter ID laws is no exception. Now, there's a big fight brewing over voter ID laws in Texas, so I thought I'd take a peek at what the law actually says. And because you're sure as hell not going to get the facts from cable news, I thought I'd try to lay out what the law actually says right here. First, let's take a look at the website where all the information can be found, and that's basically going to be the Secretary of State website for the Secretary of State of the state of Texas. Now, in case you don't know, Secretary of State in each state is responsible for this kind of thing. So no matter where you live, go to the Secretary of State website in your state and you'll find information like this. Now, this website is sos.state.tx.us. And right up front, they have an election outlook, and they want voters to be aware that they need to possess one of 7 acceptable photo IDs and what to do if they don't have those IDs. And we'll go to that page right now so you can see what they're actually talking about. Now, here, right up front, again, they say voters who do not possess and cannot reasonably obtain, and I'll get into what they mean by that, one of 7 forms of approved photo ID have additional options at the polls. Now, before we get started on what these 7 things are, keep in mind, you need to be registered to vote first. That's a separate issue. This is not about voter registration here. This is about voter ID. So you can be registered to vote, and if you don't have the right photo ID in Texas, you're going to have to go through a couple other steps in order to be able to vote. So, but most people are going to satisfy one of these documents here. And the documents are pretty straightforward. I mean, one is a driver's license, and that covers probably the majority of people in any state, much less Texas. A U.S. passport, a U.S. military ID, a Texas gun license would also suffice, a Texas personal ID card, a Texas election ID certificate, and a U.S. citizenship certificate with a photo ID. Now, what if you don't have any of these? Can you still vote in Texas? Of course you can. First, they have to explain why they can't get one of the 7 accepted forms. And there's another page for that, so I'm going to go to that page right now and show you what those requirements actually are. So they reiterate the 7 acceptable forms of ID. And then they go down here and they talk about procedures of voting. And also just above that, they have a very important piece of information. That's this right here. A list of supporting forms of ID that can be presented if the voter does not possess one of the acceptable photo ID and cannot obtain one due to a reasonable impediment. Now, let's talk about what they mean by reasonable impediment, because, you know, that's a fuzzy word, and a lot of people can say, hey, who's going to define that, because that could be abused. And that's a fair point. So when you go looking down this page here, they do have an explanation of what is a reasonable impediment right down here in subsection 4. Reasonable impediments are identified on the reasonable impediment declaration, which is what you would have to fill out at the polling place when you go to vote. And it includes a lack of transportation, disability or illness, lack of birth certificate or other documents needed to obtain an acceptable photo ID, work schedule, family responsibilities, lost or stolen photo ID, or a photo ID that's been applied for but not yet received. And you may also describe another reasonable impediment that isn't listed here. So it's a pretty liberal look at what a reasonable impediment is, essentially allowing you to define it. But for most people, I think it would fall into one of those categories. Now, What are some of the acceptable documents? That was what we had listed up above here. A supporting form of ID would be a valid voter registration certificate, which you have to get anyway. You have to be legally registered to vote. A certificate of birth. It has to be the original or a certified copy. A copy or original of a utility bill, copy or original of bank statement or a government check or an original paycheck, or a government document. So, I mean, of course, when you're at the polling place, you may not have all this information with you. So in the event that you don't have it with you, and let's say there's not enough time to go home and get it, what you can do, you can still vote. You are given a provisional ballot. And once you have that provisional ballot, you fill it out, and you have 6 calendar days to get to the clerk's office to show them one of those documents, your birth certificate or a utility bill or whatever it is. You have 6 days, and at that point, your vote will be counted, and you will have voted. So it's hard for me to imagine how any of this can be considered suppression. But some people do consider it suppression, and I think that it's all political boujaboo, to be honest with you, because I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, geez, I don't know what's so unreasonable here. What is being asked here that's unreasonable? Now, one of the things that you could also use is something called an election identification certificate, which you can apply for, that has no cost attached to it. You have to, again, prove who you are and all that, but this can be done ahead of time, and then you're done. You don't have to worry about any of this. Now, where can all of this stuff be done? To get a card like this, there's over 220 places in the state of Texas that will provide this to you. And again, there's no fee for it. So once you apply for it, then you have your photo ID. And if you're registered, you can vote. I don't understand what the hang-up is here, because, you know, one of the big things that we need to ensure our democracy and republic is the integrity of elections. Now, if you're thinking that, oh my God, look at all the paperwork, let me just show you what the paperwork actually looks like. This is the application for an election identification certificate. It's literally just contact information of the applicant, and about the only thing you need to know is your father's last name and your mother's maiden name. I would venture a guess and say that there's not a lot of people that don't know that. And a bunch of check boxes, and you need to have it notarized, which could probably be done, if not at the location where you're submitting this. Any bank has a notary public that can notarize a document for you, witness it, and you're done. So this could, to me, this looks like it could be done once you have the form filled out and notarized. It could be done in 10 minutes. It doesn't really seem like an awful burden to do this. And, you know, we do have to worry about integrity of elections. We have so many close elections nowadays. It's important that we can trust the results. A lot of people say, well, there's no evidence that there's really any material amount of voter fraud. Well, I don't know how anybody really knows the answer to that if we don't have a sufficient system in place that can flag fraud when it happens. How would we even know? People could be getting away with fraud, and we have no idea because we have no internal control mechanisms that would catch it. So in order to have voter integrity, we need to have this process firmed up like they're doing in Texas, so that if fraud is attempted, it's flagged. And everybody should be for this. So in my opinion, after looking at the state of Texas and their law, it appears to be reasonable to me. Now, maybe you could look at it and see something different, and maybe it would be good for you to write a comment after this video. I would like to know what you see in this that is unreasonable. My mind is open. So I think this system also has sufficient safeguards to prevent people from attempting most forms of voter fraud. And so I just don't understand how opposition to anything like this plan could be warranted. So that's pretty much all I had to say about this. I wanted to know if you have anything to offer that's critical. Go to that website at the Secretary of State for the state of Texas and take a look at the provisions in this law and let me know if you think that this is unreasonable. I honestly believe that we should have voter ID laws in every state, and they should be consistent. They should have certain features. They should not do certain other things, like they shouldn't charge you money for a voter ID card and all that kind of stuff. I think it should all be done so that people are able to vote, and that the people who do vote are the ones that are supposed to vote. That's it for me. I'm Tony Codispoti from Great Vocal Majority. Please visit my website or subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you have any comments, leave them below, and take care. Thanks for listening.